Welcome to the Flip Your Script podcast. I'm Kristi Piehl. Being a kid, if memory serves, now think back, it isn't easy, right? Now imagine how difficult it would be if your parent was behind bars. That was Yasmine Arrington Brooks' reality. When it was time for her to apply to colleges, she quickly realized there weren't a lot of scholarships available for students with incarcerated parents. So in 2010, as a junior in high school, Yasmine founded the nonprofit Scholar Chips to provide college scholarships and other services to kids like herself. Scholar Chips has awarded, get this, over $500,000 in scholarships to 88 scholars with 45 graduates to date. Yasmine was recently named a CNN hero. Yasmine, it's a pleasure. Welcome to the podcast.
Likewise, Kristi, it's an honor. Thank you for having me.
Such an important topic. And, as we think about students going off to college, I don't know that anyone outside of people that have been in your situation stop and think about how difficult it would be, not only if you didn't have someone modeling the path post high school, which is one big barrier for a lot of folks. There's the financial barrier to whatever is post high school, but then there's the shame that can come with, oh my goodness, I got a parent in prison, jail, and this is my reality. How did you get to the point, Yasmine, when you're a junior in high school to be able to say, not just I'm okay talking about this, but I want to fix it?
That's a really good question, Kristi. Well, fate would have it. So when I was in high school, first of all, I was in all of the things. I really think it was a distraction from my reality just to stay busy, but they were also outlets. So I was in theater. I was, volleyball, basketball, tennis. Like I was doing a lot of extracurricular activities in high school. I just wanted to try everything. And one of the, I was at the same time, I was participating in an extracurricular after-school program called LearnServe International, or sometimes we call it LearnServe or LSI. And LearnServe is a social innovation program for teenagers. So they basically helped us to realize that we had the agency, even at a young age, to make positive change. And so it was through that program. It was almost sort of like an incubator or an accelerator, if you will. And so part of that whole process was, one, we were challenged to identify a social issue in our communities, in our world that we wanted to see change and improve. And then, do the research about the, root causes of the issue, who is impacted by the issue, and then ultimately come up with a creative solution to that problem that we, imagined, or, something that we could actually potentially do. And so for me, the issue I identified is mass incarceration initially, but then that if you say mass incarceration, or prison industrial complex, it is a huge issue, very complex, lots of players, right? So I then narrowed my focus to the effects of parental incarceration on children and families. And one of the reasons I did that is because it hits home for me. As you mentioned, my dad has been in and out of jail and prison my entire life. So when we got to the research part, I started looking up statistics, and I mean, it was like that emoji. I saw a statistic that said over 2.5 million young people in the United States have an incarcerated parent. And the more updated statistic is nearly 5 million people in the United States alone have had an incarcerated parent between the ages of 0 and 18. And so that, like, once I saw that, I was like, whoa, and it made me realize that I'm not alone. And it started to kind of bother me. It was something that just wouldn't let me go. And so lastly, the last puzzle piece to that was I'm a junior in high school, so I'm preparing for college and, looking at colleges and scholarships. So my maternal grandmother who raised me we were working hand in hand and researching scholarships online. And my grandma made a, a wonderful, interesting observation. She said, you know, Yasmine, there are so many niche scholarships out here, but I don't see any for young people like yourself who have incarcerated parents. I was like, oh, I'm like, okay. You know, when I first, it was deep, but I didn't, it was just, I just said, oh, okay, grandma. Like, wow. Then realizing that I had to come up with an idea, you know, to finish this program and ultimately pitch the idea to a panel of judges. It was, if looking back on it now, I would call it a mini Shark Tank for teenagers. And so ultimately I pitched this idea called Scholarships, which it now has its own arms and legs. We have a proven model of something that was just from my research and observation. And so, but I think when I saw those statistics, that's when it hit me that there are probably a lot of other young people in my shoes who want to overcome certain obstacles in life or certain challenges or barriers, or, you know, they just want to do something new, or, you know, one of those routes being college. But it's always it's just a big, amongst many challenges, a big financial burden. And so one of the answers for that, for many young people, not only in my position, but, you know, just looking for money so they don't have to take out as many loans, if at all, is scholarships. So that all of that together is what birthed, you know, what is now scholarships.
Such a cool story. And you brought up a few things that I want to kind of pull apart. The first one is, you know, well, there's, you know, 5 million, like millions of students live knowing that they have a parent who's incarcerated, which is certainly something that's very significant. There are also a lot of kids who, if that isn't their exact situation, they are feeling shame because of something that their parent has done or the family they came into, and that can show up in a lot of different ways. But kids identifying with the parent and the parent's choices, good, bad, or otherwise, or living in the shadow of some very successful parent, whatever it might be, there's this coupling, and by how you talked about it, you're separating out. And I think in some degrees, it's easier to do that when the parent has made the kind of choices that lands them in prison, behind bars. That is the government, everyone has said, okay, what you've done is a bad choice. There's kind of a very black and white kind of, that's a bad choice, whatever it might be. But the general coupling of the child and the parent and how that impacts the identity is so strong for so many kids, and they spend years and years trying to come out of that and make their own identity and make their own name. And I think everyone can, to some degree, associate with that. And many kids don't have the words to say, boy, my parent is X, and that impacts me X. And you had the courage to do that, and you are in the shame place that can come along with my parents behind bars. So all that to say, I think that your story resonates so deeply with people because you brought something that could be in the darkness and you brought it into the light and then said, I'm okay talking about this because this isn't a reflection on me. I didn't make this choice. I couldn't make this choice. That was a choice someone else made. It impacts me and I want to help other people. And that's a remarkable thing for someone who's a junior in high school to do. Do you credit your grandmother with giving you the words and the courage and the bravery to say, boy, I'm my own person and I have the agency, which is the word you use, I have the agency to make different choices and help other people?
Yeah, well, I'll say first, Kristi, you're absolutely right. The burden of shame is very real, and it's often very heavy. And with nearly all of our scholars, I'd say over 95% of them say after they've applied and we interview them, we're now about to bring on our 13th cohort. So we've been doing that since 2012. And the students, they all say, you know, I've never talked about this. I've never shared publicly, you know, beyond the family unit that they have an incarcerated parent and how it has affected them. In terms of Grandma definitely gets some credit. Definitely gets some credit in terms of but to be honest, talking about my father being incarcerated is not something we really talked about at home very much. I talked about it more with my late mother, rest her soul. Um, but that's a whole nother story. I won't we don't have time to unpack that. But in terms of, I think a lot of it was part of it was not only my grandmother and like her, she's always been a big advocate for education. Her schooling, she was the first in our immediate family to get her undergraduate degree as well as her graduate degree in teaching. And she her whole career over 30 plus, excuse me, 40 plus years has been in early childhood education. So she had instilled in me since a toddler, or really even before then, teaching me how to read and write and teaching me, the importance of education and all of that. So that was a piece of it. But it was also definitely my faith. Like, it's kind of hard to explain, but ever since even when I was young, as a young girl, as a teenager, I always had this strong sense of faith and hope and like belief that even though my circumstances were, however you want to say, odds stacked against you, or the card that I was dealt in life, it wasn't a winning hand at all. Had it not been for my grandmother, I definitely would have been in foster care. No, there's no question about that, or I would have been couch surfing with family. But I just was, I knew that there was something more for me. And I don't even know honestly what pushed me to be open about the situation with my father. I think I was just maybe tired of carrying that for so long. And then, like I said, the research piece, when I realized that there are, I mean, I probably would have thought there were hundreds or thousands, but to see that there are millions, and like how it's kind of even hard to perceive how massive that is, right? So it's like, whoa, there are so many other young people like myself going through this. And I just kind of fell into it. I just, after I pitched scholarships to this panel of judges, they were like, Yasmine, this is a great idea. You should really pursue this. And I'm kind of like, okay. And then I did it as my Girl Scout Gold Award project. And so I just started talking about it. And then what was starting to happen was people would come up to me and say, Yasmine, my daughter's father is in prison, or my cousins, or my best friend's mom was in prison. And so I began to realize it's a much more common uh life experience, and it's across cultures. It's across cultures, across a lot of different societal, however you want to say, groups. So yeah, it really, like, I see this work as, I ran away from it for many years, but it's really destiny. It's really a purpose thing for me. And so, and the last thing I'll say is, you're right, Kristi. Like, I always tell our scholars that, your parent or parents, some have two that have been incarcerated or in and out, which is just mind blowing. And I'll say, having an incarcerated parent it's a part of our story, but it's not our full identity. So, they begin to accept that, embrace it, but realize that they still have their own their own journey to trek, their own stories to write. So
So powerful. It's so powerful. And what else I take apart from your story, Yasmine, is that you had people around you who said, you are more than the choices that someone else made. So when your grandmother said, you know what, we are going to, your education, that is a ticket perhaps to a different path. And then when
yes,
you pitch this idea and someone said, yes, you can, you will. If any of those people would have said, you know what, man, dad's in jail, you'll probably end up there too. Or they would have said, yeah, that's a cute idea, but you're only 15 or 16 or 17. That spark that was in you could have been put out. The light could have been put out. So I think that's something that we can take also from your story, is that when we're put in opportunities, we're put in places where we can encourage someone else, we need to step into that, so that that could be the little flame gets a little bit brighter. And who knows what can happen when someone says yes, and I believe in you, and you can do more. Those words can so impact children and adults. It's just the power of words, good and bad, light and
Yes,
dark.
yes, yes. Amen to that. Yes, it's true.
Can you share a story, Yasmine, of one of these scholars? Because I suspect that you are sitting on a mound of powerful stories where some teenager's life thought they were going this direction, and your program stepped in and their life went another direction. But just give us a glimpse of what something as simple as a scholarship, which the majority of people listening, if they're college educated, had access to. What does that mean? What does that do for someone's story?
Yes, absolutely. I'm thinking of the first scholar who comes to mind, who's now an alum, is Durante Craig. Durante is you know how folks will say about certain individuals, they've got the it factor, they've got it, and Durante's got it. He's a bright light, and when he steps in the room, you can feel it. He's very handsome, you're intrigued, and so Durante has a very interesting story. His long story short, his father has been incarcerated since he was born, or maybe he might not have even been 1 years old. And his father's name is Ronald. We call him Ron. And Ron, oh my goodness, he's been incarcerated. He's still incarcerated. And he's in a federal system. He's currently incarcerated in Virginia, and he's been in Virginia for probably over 10 years in terms of his sentencing, his serving his sentence. But uh, how we found out about Durante was that his father, Ron, wrote to us. And this was in the early days. And I was so moved that an incarcerated individual found us online and literally took the time to handwrite a letter and mail it to us to tell us to please reach out, connect with his son. And, he wants him to be a part of the scholarship program. And it's just been a blessing for all of us. And Durante will always share how, even though his dad was incarcerated, his dad would always tell him, don't make the same mistakes that I made, at your age. And he really pushed him in the direction of education. And so even with his father being incarcerated, he was still a positive influence in Durante's life. And he was what we call parenting from the inside, or fathering from the inside. And, Durante went on to, he earned his bachelor's from, I want to say it was Bowie State University. He was voted Mr. Bowie almost every year when he was in school. And then he made the move all the way. So he grew up in Maryland, made the move all the way to the West Coast, to California. He's currently living in Long Beach. And he went to the University of California, Irvine, and he is very creative major. I know it was entrepreneurial studies, and he got his master's degree, started his own PR, like marketing agency. And he has really blossomed into just, he was already powerful and dynamic as a teenager, but to see him go from that to where he is now, and full circle, we're flying him to come back. Our ceremony is coming up in a little bit, so I haven't seen him in a few years. So Durante is just one of those many young people who just have really powerful, heart-wrenching stories. And we've tried, like, even with Ron, to try to help get his sentence commuted, because Ron is one of those people who you can tell is remorseful. He's still done things while he's incarcerated. He has gotten different certifications. He continues with his education. But unfortunately, there's not always a whole lot of room in our justice system when people truly are rehabilitated, but they're still serving a sentence. And when you're in a state like Virginia, you got a tough road ahead. So that's the scholar that comes to mind. But there are many others as well.
Well, thank you for sharing. I suspected that you had a lot of great stories of the folks that you've helped. It's interesting. We had the gentleman who wrote From Prison to PhD, I believe is the name of the
I've
book.
heard about this. I've heard about him.
He will send you the link to. We interviewed him, Dr. Andrise, and I was some of us in my company were part of the program and have written. Then you become a pen pal to someone in the program.
Nice.
And so I was writing letters to this gentleman. He has since gotten out, but he was a father.
Oh,
yeah, he was a father, and in that first letter, it was, I just want to get out for my kids. I hate that my kids, that this is happening to them. And I think we talk a lot, generally broadly society-wise about, the message, you are more than your choices. That's a pretty kind of common message, but I don't know that we talk enough necessarily about, you are more than other people's choices that impact you. And that really is what your whole message and I would say calling are about, is that you're teaching people that they're more than the choices that have been made thrust upon them by other people. And I think just even shining the light on, back to what I said earlier about, bad or good. Well, people are never all bad or all good, right? People are all of us have both shades of that. Some
right.
folks get busted. I don't know very many people who have never done anything that wouldn't have landed them at least one night in jail. So I think it's easy to judge, but it's much probably healthier and more beneficial to figure out how to help, which is exactly what you've done. I want to talk briefly about the theme of overcoming, because you've talked about, all the different students and you mentioned his story, the one story. But if you look at all the students that you've helped over the years and you think about a theme, what commonality and what character trait do you see in these students that you've helped? Because there must be something that is common among them that gets them from where they are to seeing a brighter, different kind of future that gives them hope.
Yes, absolutely, Kristi. I think you had mentioned, well, overcoming obstacles. So that resilience, they all of them have a certain level of resilience and grit. But what often fuels it is this unrelenting, unwavering sense of hope and optimism. Hope and optimism that they can accomplish something that is positive, that most of our students are first generation college students as well. And so oftentimes they're the first in their family to travel to another state to live on a college campus and get this higher education, undergraduate education, which is really powerful. And I will say, I do agree with those who say, college isn't for everyone, or, that kind of thing. And I think that's true. And it's not to say that you can't have a very successful career, and it's not to say you can't overcome obstacles without a college education. However, from my experience, my experience in undergrad was so transformational. And so even with, okay, the good, yes, but even with the bad and the ugly, like with relationships, friendships, things that went awry, mistakes that I made, study abroad, like all of it's really just the exposure. And once you get a certain level of exposure to different cultures, different ideas, different countries, different subjects that you've never studied, it opens your mind up so much. And it's really hard. Like, I don't think you're ever the same after that. I think it's really just like, okay, what do I want to do? Or sometimes that changes, but it's just like, I don't even know how to put it into words, but it's a positive trajectory, and there are really no limits. Like once you get your foot in that door, and our students stay consistent, and they still have challenges. We've had students that have one young man, it took him 7 years to graduate, and he was dealing with mental health challenges. But he was honest with himself about those challenges. And out of that, he birthed an organization. He started a podcast. He even wrote a script. Like the young man, he's only 20 something, and he's a playwright. And he talks about I think the title of it was "Sorry What I Said to You When I Was Manic." So he delves into what it's like to have manic episodes and to be in a psychiatric ward. I mean, this stuff is really deep. But had he not gone to college, maybe not to say he wouldn't have done these things, but I'm sure that being in that environment, you just learn a lot about yourself, and you learn a lot about the world. So I'm a big, big advocate of I don't even know if I answered the question, but anyway.
No, you make a great point. Yeah, especially when there are some of the students that you're talking about, maybe in home environments or not unstable environments, where getting to college may put them in, around a different environment that then also helps with the trajectory of the life. And again, when you've been somewhere and you have only seen the reality that is one little spectrum of the world, and even not even one little spectrum of the world, but one little spectrum of a city in one state, in one country, and you actually get to go out and explore. And again, I am a big advocate of higher education, and partially because based on my experience, and I'm quite involved with a few students and mentoring and that sort of thing. And I have a college student. My son is a college student
Nice.
currently. It's what you learn is so little about the actual classroom. It's so much about, like you said, the relationships and the learning and the pain and the struggle and all the reality. Like, okay, adulting, it's not, your parents might have made it look like roses and rainbows.
Right. And then you
unicorns.
realize
The hard stuff. It's hard. People are hard. Yasmine, last question before I get to the very last question. So this is the second to the last question. Okay, you're doing your work. You're like, have this vision when you're in high school. People tell you to do it. You could do it. You try to run from it, but it keeps coming back around. You do the work. You're making the change. And CNN calls. And they're like, hey, we think that you're a CNN hero. Like, what does that do for you?
Well, actually, it wasn't linear. I actually called CNN.
Good for you. Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
I have to tell the story, and I would do my best to be succinct. So this was right before the pandemic. I want to say 2018, 2019. I learned about CNN Heroes, and I submitted, either myself or, someone had submitted a nomination online. And I got a call, and I was just like, oh my goodness, like, whoa, this is crazy. And I had an initial interview, but then nothing else happened after that. Right. And then years go by, and now we're in the end of 2022 or in 2023, and another nomination is submitted. And then I get another call. And then that interview turns into another interview, and then another interview. And then they're like, well, we want to talk to your board. We want to interview board members. We want to interview scholars. I was like, whoa, this is getting serious. Then they want to see audits and all. And we ultimately were selected as a 2023 CNN Hero, which was just unbelievable and incredible. And then later on in the year, in 2023, we learned that we were a top 10. And so, I mean, it has really... I was struggling, like scholarships and myself and we still, not all things have been solved, of course, but I think that's kind of like it keeps life interesting, right? But it has opened up a lot of doors of opportunities in a lot of different ways, and exposure that nothing else that we could have ever done could have basically put scholarships on an international stage. And so our scholarships was basically just a regional local program prior to CNN. And then I just felt this urging to open up open up the eligibility. We got 120 applications from across the country. And it has blown my mind. And then like we're getting larger donations, and I mean, like I'm on stage with celebrities that I've only seen on television and in movies. And so it's very surreal. But when I tell you my gratitude, I don't know, it's just CNN here, like I'm very grateful for it. And it has really because there's many times that I felt like giving up, or like, is this really worth it? But it was worth it, and I'm grateful to that someone at CNN had a vision for CNN Heroes. And originally there were folks in production or people like, oh, nobody wants to watch good. Like nobody wants to watch a bunch of people doing humanitarian deeds. But oh boy, were they wrong, because a lot of people love CNN Heroes and they watch it every year. There are teachers who have their students in grade school watching CNN Heroes. And I've had, like, I'm sorry, last thing I'll say, I was getting postcards from, I didn't even know people still wrote postcards. I was getting postcards from across the country. And oh my goodness, there are teachers in grade schools that are having their students select what they call everyday heroes and writing essays about them, writing letters to them. And it just makes me cry. Like, how powerful is it for someone who is where I was, 10 years old, 13 years old, who has this experience and seeing this kind of quote unquote success, and like how encouraging how encouraging that could be, for them in whatever situation they're in. So it's been life-changing on more than one level.
God, I love that. That's such a powerful story, and to hear about the trajectory of the narrative, and how, the one little thing turns into another thing, and then pretty soon, boom, it's on an international stage, and how that allows you to help more people. And I love that you shared, Yasmine, that you were vulnerable, and that you shared it's not always easy. Like, you're gonna, you look at this YouTube, if you're watching on YouTube, or you see the clip, and like, you look like you have the whole world all put together, and you know exactly what's happening. And I love that you shared that, yeah, it's hard. Even when the outcome is amazing, and even when people are paying attention and looking at you, it's still hard. And there are days where you think, why am I still doing this? There has to be something easier. So I commend you for your own resilience and modeling what you teach the students and what you see in them, which is this resilience and this grit and this inner drive. And so I commend you, and I'm so grateful that I got to meet you and chat with you. And our last question, could you please share a quote or a mantra, scripture, song, verse, whatever it is that has helped you as you've flipped your script and been inspired to help other people flip theirs?
Yes. So I'm getting a little bit churchy on you. So
you do it. You preach. You preach.
So for a scripture, there are many that I love, but one of them I memorized since I was a child, very young, and it's Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And then in terms of a quote, Albert Einstein, or at least the quote is credited to Albert Einstein, and it says, "Life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving." So those two, help me to just remember to keep pressing and keep, even when things are difficult and things are hard. And sometimes you just need a good ugly cry. I've had lots of those, like just break down, like whether sitting on the toilet or sitting on the couch doing laundry, and I just like, oh, like I'm so tired, like I can't keep doing this anymore. And then I pray, try to practice mindfulness and remember scholars like Durante and many others, and say, I have to keep going, because if I don't, you know, there may be other young people who could really benefit from this community, and not only the scholarship, but just being connected to this powerful community. So those are some of the things that keep me grounded and keep me going.
Oh, thank you. It was such a pleasure to meet you.
Likewise, Kristi. I love Flip the Script, by the way. I love the theme. I love the purpose behind it. Keep going. Keep going. I know it's not easy to do life and also be recording podcast interviews. It's a lot, but what you're doing here is just phenomenal.
Thank you. Today I needed that, so I appreciate that.
Yes.
Our Flip Your Script challenge this week is something we've talked a lot on the podcast about, sharing your story, and if there's something that brings you shame or is in the darkness, to share your story. You're not alone. But I think Yasmine brought up something that is even easier, because that to some folks is still too scary. But to know you're not alone, you could even start with a Google search. Is there something that is impacting you that you think, boy, I might be alone? And even when she did the research and found that, she was one of millions, that changed the perspective and made her know she wasn't alone, which helped fuel her to share her story. So I've never thought before today about that even simpler step of, getting a little bit of research, getting a little bit of data that can give you the comfort and the support and the courage to share the story, because you're not alone and there are other people out there just like you, fighting the same battles, waking up, putting on, a happy face, knowing what they really want to do is just have a good old ugly cry. My hope is Yasmine's story empowers you to believe you're capable of more than you think, to discover motivation, to uncover inspiration, and to find the strength to turn the page.